My EAE 1050 family. How's it going? You guys doing all right tonight? Hopefully you're all having a wonderful Wednesday evening. If I could talk today, that'd be cool. Hopefully we are having a solid week so far as well. I am doing okay. Not too shabby. It is Wednesday, so me too. Should be a good one. Tileable textures are pretty simple and straightforward and fun. So hopefully we can get through it with as little pain as possible. You made a mistake during your last assignment. That's okay. If you want to resubmit, you always can. Glad to see so many of you are in here today. So if you didn't know, our assignment this week, let me jump out of here real quick. Let's see if I can pull this up. Yes, it is similar for sure. Let's go to our assignment page real quick. You accidentally called it assignment 3. That's okay. Should be all right. Let's see here. So let's jump in and make sure we got our assignment here. Let's check out design number 3. Okay. So design number 3 is going to be creating tileable textures, pixel art tileable textures. Okay. The reason we're doing pixel art is because I don't want it to be so crazy that you're having to try to make these lifelike textures, right? Pixel art's pretty simple. Oh, excuse me. Pixel art's pretty simple, not a ton of colors that you have to use. Pretty simple shapes, right? We're just trying to keep it a little bit easier than trying to have to go in and create a realistic rock or brick texture. That would take more time than I want to take on this, right? So we're gonna use 64 by 64 tiles. Okay, that's the smallest I want you to go. If you want to go a little bit bigger, you can. And then what I want you to do when you turn in your assignment, right, is I want you to build a canvas page that looks like, not a canvas page, but a Photoshop page that looks something like this, where you're displaying your one tile, right? And then your tile filling in a sheet like this, okay? So I'll show you how to do all that, but just to give you an idea of it, you're going to create, I believe, 3 of these, right? 3 different iterations, okay, of tileables. So your sheet will look something like this, where you've got 3 individual sprites with a section of your screen tiling, so I can see that it's tiling properly, okay? You can create textures that only tile in one direction as well if you want. If you want them to tile in the Y, or if you want them to just tile in the X, that's fine as well. No worries, glad you're here. So yeah, but we'll get through that. We'll talk about that. I do have some notes and some things I want to go through. I got a slideshow for you to talk about today. Okay. So let's get through that, and then we'll jump into Photoshop and kind of the tools that we need to use to complete the assignment. Okay. But hopefully this should be a fun assignment. I think students in the past have really enjoyed this assignment. So it's fun. It's cool to see your tileable texture working properly, right? So with that being said, let's jump into our slideshow for the day, okay? So we're going to be talking today about texture, repetition, pattern, and rhythm. And I may turn my face off. We'll see. Just to make sure I'm not covering important stuff, but we'll see. My let's go back. Okay, there we go. So, is it allowed to use hexels? I think we'll just stick to tiles for this assignment. I mean, hexels are cool too, but I think we'll just stick to tiles. If you want to message me and you want to do hexels and you feel comfortable doing that, we can set something up and make that work. But for right now, let's stick to tiles, okay? All right, so texture, repetition, pattern, rhythm. Let's get through this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is texture, okay? And texture, let me just move myself out of the way here. I'm just going to turn myself off for a second, okay? I don't know. I kind of like to have my face in here, but maybe I can move myself like small up here or something. May have to move myself around for every slide, but we'll see. Let's do this here. Okay. Yes, Grim, that should be fine. Okay, so let's talk texture. Okay, so texture obviously is the way a object is going to feel or is going to be perceived to feel, right? Textures can generate interest or repel interest based on the quality of that texture, right? Texture can also create powerful emotions, okay? Because you've got, familiar memories, or you've got a context in which you have seen or felt or experienced this texture or this feel before, right? So for examples, we've got like a soft blanket as a kid. You remember kind of how that blanket feels, or you remember kind of the feeling of, if you've ever been in the desert. I mean, we live in Utah, so this kind of really dried out mud and dirt is really a unique experience to walk on something like that, right? As well as, maybe the skin of a durian fruit or something, okay? All very different experiences. With that being said, textures can be actual or they can be implied, okay? Actual textures are tactile, right? Something you can feel and grab and hold on to, right? While implied textures are visual, like what you'd see in a video game or even in a film, right? It's something you're seeing. You're not actually experiencing that. It's not a tactile thing that you're holding on to, right? Or not necessarily holding on to, but experiencing physically, okay? Most textures are going to display some sort of element of pattern, okay? And that's not necessarily every case, but it's most cases, okay? Even out in the wild, in the real world, you're gonna find pattern, okay? Textures can also be simulated and they can be invented. And you can kind of guess what that means, but let's talk about it a little bit. So simulated textures are going to be things that replicate reality, right? So if you look here, we've got a actual stone wall or stone floor texture here, okay? It's from the real world. And the one above it is a pixel art stone brick wall and floor, right? It's a simulated texture. You are trying to replicate reality with this texture, okay? Invented textures are something that is something that's made up and not an abstraction of a real texture, right? So if you were to play a game and you jump into an alien planet and there is some type of flora or fauna that has a type of texture that doesn't exist in our universe or our world, that's an invented texture, right? Aliens don't exist. So alien skin, while it may be similar, you know, some of these artists have a lot of freedom and artistic liberty to create these textures that are not abstractions of real texture, right? So they're completely building these things from the ground up, okay? When we're describing texture, we often have a few terms that you'll hear quite a bit, and these things are, you know, just descriptive words that we use. A lot of the times they get thrown out there when there's different map types as well in texture, which as you move forward in the program, you'll understand that a texture is not just the color on an object, right? So when we say the word rough, when we're referring to textures, we're talking about textures that reflect light unevenly, right? So something like this piece of stucco that I've kind of shown here, right? That's not reflecting light evenly across the board, okay? Smooth textures like this wood floor here, right? Or this laminate floor is going to reflect light pretty evenly across, right? It's very smooth. So that light is going to bounce and distribute pretty evenly across that surface, okay? A matte surface, like the wrap on this BMW, is a texture that reflects dull, soft light, right? So it's hitting that wrap and very much being absorbed into this and then sort of just dulling that light, right? And then you've got something like this piece of chrome, okay, where it's very shiny. So when we're talking about shiny, we're talking about textures that reflect brilliant, strong light. And it doesn't have to always be metal, okay? It could be other surfaces as well, right? So we've got rough, smooth, matte, and shiny. Next element we're going to talk about, okay? So we talked about texture. Next thing we need to talk about is repetition, okay? So repetition is the repeating of a single element many times in a design. So consistent repetition, when you have consistent repetition in a design, even in this background to this slideshow, right? It gives your brain an opportunity to rest, right? Your brain doesn't have to work very hard because it can pretty much understand what's happening across the board. It sees it and it's a repetition, right? Consistent repetition gives your brain an opportunity to rest. However, it can also create interest, right? Because it's causing movement, right? Your eyes are jumping across the screen trying to figure out what's going on. And it can also create unity, right? When you have this repetition and consistent repetition, it can unify an object and build structure, right? The next piece to talk about here is pattern. Somebody already kind of mentioned pattern a little bit, okay? We mentioned that pattern is a combination of motifs, okay? And we'll talk about a motif. If any of you haven't heard what a motif is, then here's a definition for it, okay? Motif is a decorative design or pattern. So it's almost a little bit of a circular definition here, but pattern is a combination of motifs repeated in a recurring, regular arrangement, okay? So you could say the motif of this heart pattern here is the heart, right? And then it's been placed into a pattern by arranging it in these rows and columns, okay? Same thing with the argyle as well as this flower print, okay? And then the last, I don't know if this is last, but I think it is. Texture, repetition, pattern, rhythm. Yeah. So the last element I believe here that we need to talk about is rhythm, okay? And rhythm kind of goes hand in hand with pattern. So all pattern has rhythm, but not all rhythm has pattern, okay? Rhythm is a combination of variable repeating elements. And if we go back, right, we remember that, come on. We remember that pattern is a combination of motifs, right? Repeating in a recurring regular arrangement. So then we look at pattern, right? All pattern has rhythm, but not all rhythm has pattern. Rhythm is a combination of variable repeating elements, okay? And there's a couple different types of rhythm that we need to talk about here. And I've got definitions and we can jump into and explain some of these, okay? So regular rhythm is like a heart or a song with a steady beat. Regular rhythm is created by a series of elements, often identical or similar, that are placed at regular or similar intervals, such as grids, right? Simple regular rhythms, if overused, can be monotonous. So this heart pattern that we have here is a perfect example of regular rhythm, right? We have each one of these similar or identical elements placed in a grid, right? These hearts have been placed in a grid to create this pattern. So this heart pattern has regular rhythm to it, okay? If overused, if this type of rhythm is overused, it can become monotonous, right? If this is the only type of texture you had in your game, people are going to get very overstimulated by this type of rhythm, okay? Next one is alternating rhythm, okay? So you have two or more different motifs, okay? Our two motifs here, for example, are what? We've got a gray elephant and we've got a white elephant. Those are our two different motifs, right? So two or more motifs may be alternated, such as black and red squares on a checkerboard, right? So we've got two motifs, as in a red square and a black square, right? They're being alternated in a checkerboard. A single motif might be flipped, mirrored, or rotated every so many iterations, or the placement or spacing between these motifs can be alternated, okay? This is essentially regular rhythm, but it has a little bit more complex motifs or meta motifs. They add a little bit of variety and can help lessen the monotony of regular rhythm. So this elephant pattern, I would say, is a little bit more interesting to look at because, one, there's more going on here than just the hearts being placed in a grid, right? We've got our different motifs being flipped or alternated. That is alternating rhythm, okay? The last one here we've got, I believe, is flowing rhythm. No, that's not the last one. The next one is flowing rhythm, okay? So flowing rhythm is created by undulating elements in intervals, bending and curving motifs in spaces. Natural flowing rhythm can be seen in streams and waterways, beaches and waves, sand dunes and glaciers, rolling hills and wind-blown grasses. So you've got this sort of flowing, undulating element, right, in intervals. So you've got all these, if you look here, the rhythm here is all these different kind of curving, bending pieces to the waves. There's also more of those happening down here, right? In the waves, the lines coming off of here, okay? A little bit different, a little bit more interesting to look at. The last one here we've got is progressive rhythm, okay? In progressive rhythm, each time a motif repeats, it changes a little, transforming and translating in a steady sequence. The motif progresses from one thing to another, right? So if we're looking at this kind of this painting here, each time this sort of object was placed on the canvas, you can kind of start to see that rhythm where there was a shape that was placed and then placed again and changed a little, placed again and changed a little, placed again and changed a little, until it's completely morphed into different shapes around, right? So it steadily changes, right? You can also say something similar to progressive rhythm is when you see like those step images of like evolution, right? Boom, 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 boom. And they do that in like a big, huge panel with a bunch of different creatures. And they've shown like steps. Each time it's placed, it changes a little, right? So that motif progresses from one thing to another, okay? And then our last, I believe this is our last. Yes, it is. Our last kind of topic that I want to talk about is more of a, it's kind of a, I would say not a belief structure, but a structure in which you can view objects and elements in your own designs. Okay. So we have the sort of term of wabi-sabi. Okay. And you'll hear this probably throughout the program, I would imagine. More people will say it or use it, or you'll hear this type of term in the future as well. Okay. So wabi-sabi, means objects and environments that embody naturalness, simplicity, and subtle imperfection, okay? To achieve a deeper, more meaningful aesthetic, right? I'm not talking about wasabi. I'm talking about wabi-sabi. So I can move my face a little bit here. Wabi-sabi, okay? And it's broken up into kind of a two-section word. Wabi-sabi, not wasabi, right? This stuff will burn your mouth. Hopefully, this will help you with your designs, okay? All right, so when we're talking about wabi in this wabi-sabi definition, okay, we're talking about the transcendental beauty achieved through subtle imperfections, such as in handmade goods, right? You can tell that a human or a pair of hands built this object, right? It wasn't built in a factory. There's no seam on the plastic mold, right? Somebody used their hands to build this object. And there's that beauty that's achieved, right, through the subtle imperfections in these objects, right? So there may be a dent or a ding, or maybe the clay that was used wasn't perfectly refined, or maybe the blanket that was being stitched has a mistake in it somewhere, right? Maybe the pot has cracked, or the piece of wood that was used had a big knot in it, right? Okay. That is the wabi portion of wabi-sabi. And when we're talking about sabi, we're talking about beauty that comes with time, such as patina on aged copper, right? When that oxidization process starts to happen on this metal, right? There's sort of a subtle beauty that happens when these objects or items start to break down or change over time, right? The sand dunes or Arches National Park. If you haven't been there, you live in Utah, so it's worth checking out, right? The erosion and thing that happens over time. Okay. The dings and dents that happen on a wood table over time as you set cups, plates, tools, right? There's a beauty that comes with that, right? And a realism that happens with that. So when you're thinking about texture in the real world, the reason why we want to think about this is when you're building textures, not everything was built in a factory, right? Not everything was made in a factory, built in a plastic mold, right? So when you're think about that and you're putting objects in a game, you can think about all the different experiences that object may have had, right? A sword or a knife may have had, a lot of wear and tear on it, depending on the user, right? So as you're going through building your tileable textures today, think about what things may have happened over time. Not all rocks are going to look the same, right? Rocks aren't all one shape. Pieces of wood aren't all one shape. You're hungry now. So just think about that, okay? These objects in the real world, if they exist, especially metal and stone and wood, all these things have a change that happens to them with use over time, okay? As they experience weather or human use, right? Okay, I believe that's it for our slideshow. So I still owe you both of these slideshows that we used from last week. I will quickly drop these into our channel. So I will drop this one in here for you guys, and I will drop our perspective one in as well. Oh, hold on. Okay, and let's do last week's. Don't want to join Nitro. If I need to, I'll put these up on the I will put these up onto our Canvas page. So here's the slides from today, but I'll throw the other ones up on the Canvas page since Discord is being lame. So, okay. Any questions on any of that stuff so far? I thought I got most of them. I don't think I saw too many questions. But what I would like to do now is jump into Photoshop and let's talk about the assignment and how we actually go about creating these tileable textures. Okay, so let's jump into Photoshop here. So what I'm going to do to start here is I'm going to hit create new, and I'm just going to start with a 64 by 64 image here. Okay, so 64 by 64 pixels. Make sure it's set, the drop down set to pixels. Okay, I'll go 64 by 64. I'm going to hit create, and I'm going to zoom in here because it's going to be very small. And then I'm going to show you a couple different tools to start doing pixel art 1, and then we'll talk about jumping into doing tileables. Okay. So I've created this very small tile inside of Photoshop. If I want to start painting in this tile, I could do a brush, right? I can use a brush. However, it's not going to be very friendly. And a lot of people, when they're creating pixel art, like to do one pixel at a time. Okay. If you want to do that, you click and hold on your brush tool over here on the left-hand side. And you're going to go to pencil tool. Okay. I'm going to make me a little bit smaller over here. Kind of drop myself in the corner right here. Okay, so we've set our pencil. Now I can draw one pixel at a time, right? There's our lovely little. Okay, one pixel at a time. So there's your pencil tool. And then you may be asking, okay, well, now that I can draw one pixel at a time, maybe I want to be able to erase too, right? And you'll notice if you start trying to erase right off the bat by hitting the E key, let me make sure I'm drawing on a extra layer here before I start trying to erase. So if I hit my eraser, you'll notice that my eraser is set to brush by default. So if I start trying to erase pixels, you'll see that it has a bit of a fall off or a feathering to it. people when they're doing pixel art do not like that for the most part. So you're going to want to, under your eraser tool, which is here, there's a little mode, right? Sorry, my allergies are destroying me. So there's a little mode right here at the top that says brush. If you click that drop down, you can jump to pencil. And now that will give you a pixel, 1 pixel eraser, which is super helpful for doing pixel art. Okay. So, you can also change your brush size the same way that you could before with the bracket keys. All right. So that is all you really need to start drawing in pixel art. The pencil tool and the pencil eraser. And then you should be able to start, you know, creating at least pixel art. You've got a small image, right? And a small brush. Oh, they've been so bad for me the last few days. Okay, so if we're talking about tileables, the first thing we need to talk about is how tileables actually work, right? So when we use a tileable like this, what's happening is when you have a tileable, I'm just going to break this up and it's not going to be perfectly even. But what happens when you have a tileable texture, right, is you need to make sure that the square, let's assume this main square that we have is just one of these, right? What needs to happen is your image needs to wrap at every single corner, right? Every single edge where those images are connecting. Your texture needs to make sure that it's overlapping in a way that when you go to tile this big tile, that when it's placed in space, that every one of these corners overlap, right? And make sense so that you can essentially tile them and you cannot see where a seam is, right? And a seam is going to be anywhere on one of the edges where you can tell that something funny is happening, right? And or not, but that's how you can tell where a seam exists. I'll give you some examples here of a bad texture seam. You've all probably seen them in video games before, but let's see here. Okay. So here's an example, okay? Excuse me. So if you can see here, you have this tileable texture that this person has created, okay? And you can see on the seams of this object where the tileable may not be working properly. And this may not be a perfect tileable. I'm not totally sure what's happening here. But you can see these seams on this object, okay? What we don't want to happen is your texture itself to have seams, right? So if we can hide that, that's the only way you're going to be able to make a true tileable, okay? If you were to scale that texture up and have a bunch of these tiles, you can't tell where one tile starts and the other one ends, okay? And that's not true in every case. At some point, if you zoom out enough, you're going to be able to see the tiling. It's just how it works. You've seen it in video games. If you jump high enough and get high enough above when you're hacking a game or something, and you get high enough above the ground and look down at the ground, you're going to start to be able to see big ground tileable textures, right? Or water textures in a big square, right? I made it 64 by 64 pixels. That's how big it is. Okay. So, but we want to do our best as the texture artist. We want to do our best to create as little seam or as small a seam as possible, right? So if we're going to build let's build a rock tileable texture, okay? We'll do like a stone floor texture here, okay? And what I want to do is create something to where if I build this, Here's the thing though, I'm noticing that this kind of shape that's happening here is going to be very easy to tell. So let's break this up a little bit. We're going to build this stone texture, okay? Kind of a stone floor, cobblestone texture. All right. So here's the deal, okay? This is not going to tile, right? And I'm going to show you why. Because I didn't do any due diligence to make sure that anywhere of my texture is wrapping properly. Okay, so what I want to show you is a tool right now to kind of check your tileable before you go through the process of using an offset filter to fix any seams or anything that's happening here. Okay, so let's go ahead and define a pattern, which we can do in Photoshop under Edit, and it's called Define Pattern. Okay, we're going to call this really bad because it's not going to tile, right? So we'll just call it that for right now. And then what I'm going to do is create a new canvas that's a little bit bigger. We'll do something like a 512 by 512. Okay, just something a little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do now is go Edit, and I'm going to go Fill, and I'm going to fill that. Sorry, I need to make sure I'm on a new layer. I'm going to go Edit, and then I'm going to go Fill. And then what's going to happen is this Fill window is going to pop up, and I'm going to be able to jump down. It's probably set to foreground color by default, but you'll click this drop down and go down to Pattern right here, which we just defined a second ago. And then you can go to Custom Pattern right here and find the one that you just created. Okay, so I've got this guy right here, our really bad pattern. And I can hit OK, and it's going to fill. Okay. And what we can see is that there are some spots where it's doing okay, but there are definitely some areas where our tileable is not tiling properly, right? There are some areas where our tile does just not line up, right? It's creating almost this little snake, right? So what we need to do here in order for this to work properly over on this side is I need to go on this tile and run an offset on this, where we take this tile and break it up into 4 sections that will arrange it in such a way that shows us where our tiling issues are. Okay, so it's a pretty simple, straightforward process. If I go to Filter and I go to Other and I go to Offset right here, okay, I want to offset it by half of my pixel count in each direction. Okay, so because I created a 32 by 32 pixel, because I created a 64 by 64 canvas, we want to offset it by 32 pixels in each direction. Okay, so we've done that, right? Now look at this. What looks familiar? If we're looking at this here and looking at this here, well, look, that's a tile that shows exactly where the errors were happening, right? No, drawing on this screen does not edit your pattern. Nope, does not edit this tile. So what we need to do is our due diligence to correct the errors that are happening on this side of the screen. So what we can do is say, okay, well, let's maybe try to make something out of this shape that's happening here. So I'm going to create some sort of rock here. And maybe I create some sort of rock here, right? And erase some lines that's happening in between to try to make something a little bit more cohesive. So we've deleted that, made a rock that maybe makes a little bit more sense. And then maybe try to build a rock out of this here, right? Try to build something out of that. And then maybe we try to build a rock here that we can... Or maybe this ends up turning into 2 rocks, right? And we can still add more things in here, right? To help fill this area out. Okay. And now what I want to do is take this and go back to my filter and my offset, and I'm going to 0 this out. So let's undo that real quick. So go filter, other, offset. I'm just going to 0 this back out to where it was before. Okay. So let's undo this real fast. So we've gone ahead and done that. Okay. Now we can redefine this as a pattern. So if we go filter, or sorry, edit, define pattern, we can do this as second attempt or something. Now if we come back in here and redo our fill, so we go edit fill, we fill it with this new pattern that we created. Look at that. That pattern looks a lot better and is tiling properly. There are still some things in here that we could adjust, right? There are some rocks in here that are very easily recognizable because they're much bigger than other rocks, right? So there's some things we could do by looking at this pattern over here to help adjust this, right? Like if we combine some rocks into one, like let's say we make this one big rock. Okay. That might help break it up a little bit more. Let's make this one big rock right here. Then maybe we make this a bigger rock right here. And there's definitely some adjusting we can do to these to make them feel a lot better. But what we're trying to do is break up the monotony, right? Or break up the easily recognizable rock that's happening when we tile, okay? So let's come back in here and do this again. So we'll go edit, define pattern. We'll try attempt 3. Okay. We'll go back over here and do edit, fill with this new one. Okay. So that's starting to be a little bit harder to tell where one stops and one ends, right? We could maybe break it up a little bit more by throwing some littler rocks in between. Maybe in some of these gaps to make it less obvious where things are showing up. So we do maybe a small rock here. Something like this. We could do another small one here, maybe. Maybe something over here. Maybe another one in here. A couple over here. Something here. Maybe something up here that we end up having to tile. So let's try this again. So we'll go edit, define pattern. Say attempt 4. Trypophobia. Okay. So now we go edit, fill. And we'll try this with our new one that we just created. Boom. All right. I'm getting happier and happier with this, right? But there are still some things that are kind of easily seen, like this rock here. We could maybe break up or shrink some of these down, but that's not a bad looking start. Like if you zoom in like that, that feels pretty good, right? So let's come in here and we'll just start kind of cleaning this up a little bit, and we'll do a little bit of pixel art work here. So I'm going to clean up some of these rocks a little bit. And then I'll just kind of go through my process of adding more detail to each one of these stones, right? Nice thing you can do is define a color palette from the start, right? So maybe I'll grab a color palette here in a second, but what I'm going to do is just clean up kind of the shapes of my rocks here first before I start jumping into any of that. Excuse me. Sorry. So in pixel art, these extra pixels like this have a term. And I got to remember what it is off the top of my head. They are called, what's the name of them? I think they're called doubles. And then there's another thing called a jaggy. Excuse me. So you've got what's called a jaggy, right? So you want something like this, right? Instead, where you have equal number of pixels stacked in order to create a diagonal, versus something like this to create a diagonal where you have these doubles as well. Doubles that end up on corners and things. So that's what I'm trying to go through right now and remove, is all these doubles. almost got them all taken out here. There's a couple more right here. That should be pretty good. Okay. So now that I've got this, what I want to do is set a color palette. Okay. So if I want to do like maybe a sandstone, or I don't know, it's like a rock, you know, something you could look at is just grab maybe a reference, right? So if you wanted to do like a sandstone floor, you look at something like this, right? They have things like that, or you could do, you know, more of a cobblestone. Or you grab some colors like that, or you do some sort of brick. Might try to grab something that's kind of like this. This is kind of cool. So what I'll do with this sort of information is I'll take this image and then I'll build my color palette from that. So I could drop in, you know, I could drop in this image into a different file in Photoshop. Oh, it's a web file. That's why it's not cooperating. Let's just cheat it. I'm just going to go like this. Okay. Throw this in a new layer. Then I'm just going to try to find, you know, the darks and lights of this scene. So there's a really dark, like in between color. So let's grab, you know, do something like this. That's pretty much black, right? So maybe I'll lighten it up a little bit. I don't know, maybe not. Something like this. And jump back here and grab, you know, some colors for these stones. And I just put this on another layer. I'm just trying to grab highlight colors for these too. So maybe that's a really high highlight. And try to grab some like lower tones too. So do something like this. Then I might grab these grassy colors too, because I kind of like how those are looking. Might throw some of those in there. Try to get a really dark color for that. Try to get a mid-tone. Okay. That seems pretty good to me right there. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the darkest color that I've got and I'm going to replace this line art with my darkest color of my stones here. Okay. So on my layer 1 where I've created this line art, I'm going to call this line art. I'm going to do what's called a pixel lock, right? Or a lock transparency. So I'm going to lock the transparency on these pixels. And then what that means is I can just paint. It's just basically creating a mask out of these pixels. And I can just paint over the top of these pixels. And that will create, you know, the right color for those. So I'm just painting almost as if I masked those pixels off and I just filled them with this new color. And I can turn this off. So it's just this little checkerboard right here. Okay. Then what I want to do is create a new layer underneath here. And I want to fill it with this background color that I had. Okay. So I had this background color. I'm just going to throw this here. It might be. I'm just going to fill it with that. And there may be a darker color, right? I may even grab a darker color for that. Because that feels a little bit better to me. Okay. And in some areas, I could maybe use a highlight of that dirt. So then from there, what I want to do is grab, you know, maybe the highlight colors of these stones and just start filling them in. I'm going to grab, you know, some areas here and just kind of start filling these. And I want to put this underneath my line art, right? I'm just trying to get the sort of start of my rocks here. Just give them all kind of a base color, right? Turn off my palette for a second while we fill this in. Sorry about the sound of the bugs. Okay. Yeah. Hopefully the camera's not totally in the way. Let's see. Hopefully that's not too much in the way. Okay. Bug jams. Yeah, that kind of is what it sounds like, for sure. Okay, so I've kind of got this filled. Going crazy to play those instruments, for sure. Okay, so now what I want to do is, so I filled it with this kind of bass tone. Now I might take this tone again and maybe just tune it back a hair to try to get like a shaded color here. And I may even try to bring it closer to the same hue as kind of the rock there. That's good. Now what I'm going to do is just try to get some shading on these rocks a little bit. It's not going to be completely perfect. And then I'll try to hit them with a little bit of a highlight too. Okay, I'm going to turn off my color palette for a second so I can see something here. Okay, perfect. Glad it's working. All right. Yeah, I don't want to be covering up things that you guys need to be seeing. So if the camera ever becomes an issue, please say something. Do not want the camera to be an issue where you cannot see critical info if needed. Now I'm just going to try to hit some kind of okay. Then I'm going to come in with that highlight layer that I have, which was this one. And try to get these, which that just feels almost too bright. So I may readjust a little bit here. And just take this and take this hue up and shift it a little bit towards purple. I don't know if I want it pink. Maybe we'll shift it more towards blue. It feels good. Try to hit some highlights on these rocks too. This stream is getting rather rocky. True. Very true. The other thing I'd like to do is hit some of these with that green tone too. And I'd like to go underneath on this layer, on this, and just give it a little bit of variation to it. So what I'm gonna do is grab this color, change the hue, shift it a little bit, and take a maybe like a different brush here. Maybe like a charcoal brush or something. Hit it with something like this. Just to make it not all the same color underneath there. Shift hue again. Let's go towards yellow. Don't want it to be too noisy under there. Let's do that on a different layer. Take the opacity way down on it. Yeah, way better. Okay. See, I didn't want to have like a... Yeah, okay. Then I'm noticing too of this line art that I don't really love the outline color of these rocks. So maybe what I'll do is darken them up a little bit. So I'm going to do that same transparency lock on this line art layer. Take this same color and I'm just going to darken this just a hair. Jump back over to my regular brush. Just line art. I don't want to be that dark. That feels better now. Okay. Now I want to bring back in this, and I want to hit some of these rocks with this mossy color. I'm going to throw a new layer in there. I'm just going to come through here with this mossy color on some of these. Take this mid-tone on there. Just on some of these rocks. Not all of them. We'll hit a couple high tones on here too. And then I'm going to go into the dirt layer. And I'm going to hit it with, turn on the line art so I can see the outlines. And then I'm going to hit it with some of these greens in between here. We'll hit it with the mid-tone. And we'll come in with the high key. All right, let's turn all our stuff back on. Okay, so that's looking and feeling pretty good. So what I want to do now is I want to take this same thing. I'm going to go edit, and I'm going to go define pattern. We're going to call this rock texture. Hit OK. And we'll come over to a new tab. So we'll go File, New. Do the same 512 by 512. That's fine. And I just want to try this real quick. Edit, fill. Just make sure my tile works. Okay. Boom. Clearly, there are some rows and things happening that we could do to help clean that up a little bit. But for right now, it's okay. You offset in horizontal and vertical. I mean, you don't have to, but I did. Okay. So if you are going to turn this in, let's run through how I want you to turn this in real quick. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is hand in a, let's say I don't know, an image like this where you've got a 1920 by 1080 image. Okay. So you've got something like this. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay. What I would like you to do is take your image here. So come in here. Control C, all of your layers here. So you can group these or however you want to do that. And I want you to come in here and paste it in this window. Okay. First thing you should probably do is combine all your layers here so you can merge one. I duplicated them just in case I wanted to go in and redefine that a little bit. So you will come in here and paste your tile. If you want that to be a little bit bigger, you could go something like this. And just scale it up. That's fine. Although I don't want it to be blurry. So the other way you could go about doing that is you could blow this up to a bigger size. I'm not super worried about it. You could make a smaller canvas size, but there's your little tile set, right, that you created. Here's your 64 by 64. And then I want to see something like this, where you take a section of this right here with your selection tool and go edit, fill. And you're going to fill it with that pattern. Okay. And then you'd have another pattern. So let's say I have, you know, another pattern. So I'd have another something like this. And you've got a third one and you got something like that. That would be fine, right? And all three of these are going to be different, obviously, right? I don't know if I have three. I may have three textures. Let's see. So you'd have I don't know, a different tileable. I don't know what other tileables I've made in here. What else do I got? I've got a stone one that I did. This one. Okay. And I have this forest thing that I did too, I think. Forest floor. Which is okay. That tile is not great. It's supposed to look like a forest floor. Let's see if I got a different one. Thought I did a grass, but maybe I didn't. Is this it? Nope. Got another stone one that I did too. That one, not as good as this one that I just made. I'm just trying to show you what it would look like if you set up your image, right? So you've got something like this, right? Okay. Where you've built out your 3 different tileables, you'd have 3 different, you know, sections that would look like this, where you've got your tile, right, that you've created, and it goes around. Granted, that's not my tile, but you know what I'm saying. So you'll turn in a sheet that looks like this, okay, with your 3 tiles, with a section of the screen showing that your tile works properly. Cool. With that being said, I will let you guys go for the evening. This is a quicker assignment, but that's okay. So I'll let you guys go. You guys don't need to see me build. I mean, I could, but same process to build all 3 of those textures. So use the remainder of what class time we would have to have lab time. Okay. I'll be on my Discord for the next hour and a half. So if you have questions while you're working during lab time, just hit me up on the Discord. And I should be able to get right back to you. Okay. Let's talk about our attendance question for today. Okay. Sorry, I don't know why I typed that in there. Let's do Notepad. So we're gonna say, let's do not sticky keys. Let's say define pattern. That's gonna be our attendance answer for today. Okay. Nope, you didn't miss. It's right here. So here's your attendance answer for the day. Okay. Okay, if there's no more questions, I will let you all go for the evening. Remember, you're doing 3 of these different tiles, okay? Turn in a sheet that looks something like this with your tile and a portion of the sheet filled with your tileable, okay? So again, just follow that little process to get your tileable working properly. And then you're going to build 3 different tiles, okay? And if you need anything from me, hit me up on the Discord. I should be there. Like I said, I'll be there till 9, like readily available for you. So I'll answer questions, and if you need something, I'll hit you right back. Okay. And if not, I will see you all next week. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of a preview for next week, I think we are jumping into Adobe Illustrator next week. So we'll be working on some logos, which will be fun. Okay. All right, everybody. I will see you guys next week. Okay. Have a good one. Talk to you later.